Chapter 11. Self-defense, a legal term. I own a school named Krav Maga CDK, Self-Defense Center. When people ask me what I do, I tell them that I'm a self-defense instructor. People come to me and tell me that they want to learn self-defense. Yet, throughout this book, I have veered away from using the term self-defense, and instead, I've used the term self-protection. The reason? Self-defense is a legal term. When it comes to self-protection, there are 5 important elements everyone should know. 1. Mental preparation. Understanding and being willing and capable of using violence to defend yourself. 2. Physical preparation. Knowing how to and being capable of physically defending yourself. 3. The actual act. Doing what you're trained to do if or when the shit goes down. 4. The psychological aftermath. Actually being at peace with what you did. Inflicting violence can give good people nightmares for life. 5. The legal issues. Understanding the legal ramifications and consequences of your actions. I've been training in martial arts for over 30 years, and I've never met an instructor that was an expert in all 5 categories, although I've met some that claim to be. About 10 years ago, I started to think that it was important to learn about the legalities of what I was teaching my students to do. At the time, I was teaching in Washington, D.C., which I soon found out had an entirely different set of laws than that of the state of Maryland, which was pretty much across the street. Maryland has a totally different set of rules from Virginia, which is also in the same vicinity. If that didn't make things complicated enough, the legal jargon that is used in law is pretty much equivalent to reading a foreign language. It's almost written as if you're not supposed to understand. I guess that's why good lawyers get paid so well. I'm an expert when it comes to teaching someone the physical components of protecting themselves against violence. I'm not a psychiatrist, nor am I a criminal defense attorney. If you've made the decision that you'll defend yourself and your family by any means necessary, there are a few books that I would definitely recommend, including The Law of Self-Defense by Andrew Branca, Force Dimensions by Roy Miller, In the Name of Self-Defense by Mac Young, Why Me by Robert Bryan, and The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. In this book, I'll cover some basics. What is self-defense really? Self-defense is a legal term used to explain why an individual or a group of individuals engage in violence to legally protect themselves, their loved ones, or their property. What that means is that you're supposed to be allowed to use a reasonable amount of force that you deem necessary to defend yourself, defend another person, defend your property, prevent a crime, etc. Let's break it down. What exactly is a reasonable amount of force? More importantly, who determines it? Well, that's where the jury comes in. If a violent situation is prosecuted under the law, a jury or judge has to decide whether or not, given the particular circumstances, what the perpetrator did was reasonable. Here's an example. You're standing on one side of a street. Another person is on the other side of the street. That person makes a verbal threat against you, and you respond by pulling out a gun and shooting that person. Yes, the person threatened you, but you would have a hard time convincing the judge or jury that the amount of force you used was reasonable. However, if that same individual was 6 feet away from you and holding a knife, that same act might be considered reasonable. When teaching self-protection, most instructors assume their students are good people. They assume that if their students were ever in a situation where they had to use violence to protect themselves, the student would be the good guy, not the bad guy. While this may be true, it is important to remember that self-defense is a legal term. Unfortunately, the law doesn't care who the good guy or the bad guy is in a situation. The law only cares about the law. If a woman is jogging on a trail and a man jumps out of the bushes, attacks her, and attempts to sexually assault her, I don't think there would be too many things that she could physically do that would be considered unreasonable to protect herself. However, there are some things she could say that, when given to the right prosecutor with the right political agenda, could be used to put her behind bars. Here's an example. A woman gets attacked while jogging. She can get away, and as she is running, the bad guy starts to chase her. The woman picks up a rock and hits the bad guy in the head. The bad guy falls to the ground and dies. When the police arrive, they ask her what happened. Her response is, "This asshole grabbed me and pulled me into the woods. He thought he would be able to scare me and I would give in. I pushed him away, and as I was leaving, he followed me. So I picked up a rock and crushed it upside the fucker's skull." I know there are a lot of women who would agree with what the jogger did. They would give her the female badge label of a badass. Believe it or not, good people have gone to jail for a lot less. But if we change the woman's response, it could change the outcome of the situation. For example, if she tells the police, "This man grabbed me when I was running and pulled me into the woods and tried to rape me. I was able to fight him off and run away. He chased me. Fearing for my life, I picked up a rock and swung it." What you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, which is why self-defense is a legal term. Believe me when I tell you that the law can be complicated and, oftentimes, expensive. There is a common belief that if you were to take someone's life, even if you were the good guy and you acted in self-protection, it would cost you $1 million to stay out of jail. I'm not sure if that figure is true, but it will cost you something. Not knowing the law is no excuse for breaking the law, and definitely will not hold up in a court of law. You must know what you can and cannot do when it comes to protecting yourself. I think it is also important that you are not stuck with the analysis paralysis and do not act accordingly if or when the situation arises. This is where your training will come in. Not only your physical training and your mental preparation, but also your training as it pertains to the law. It may also help you to have a lawyer on retainer. I have self-defense insurance, which although it doesn't cover everything, at least it helps me sleep well at night knowing that I have some sort of protection so that I can protect myself or someone else without hesitation. Most self-protection instructors don't consider the legal aspects of what they are teaching their students to do. Most don't know anything about it. The question is, should they? If they are any good at what they do, then they are teaching their students to think before they react and not react before they think. They should also at least advise their students to know that not only the things they do, but also the things they say can incriminate them. Beyond that, they're probably stepping outside their area of expertise, unless, of course, they're a lawyer. It is dangerous to give out legal advice when you're not a lawyer. An instructor is looked upon by his students as an expert in whatever they are teaching. If they're teaching how to punch, their students will view them as experts in punching. If they're teaching how to do a rear choke, their students will view them as an expert in the rear choke. If they teach kicks or gun disarms, it's the same deal. If you're not an expert, you shouldn't be teaching that particular subject matter. When I'm speaking on a topic or even a technique that I'm not fully trained or qualified to teach, I always preface it with, "I'm not an expert on this." I do this often, especially when I'm teaching officers. I teach them gun disarms, for example. Once they take away the gun, they are now out of the area of my expertise. I can shoot, but not nearly good enough to teach how, when, or even why to an officer of the law. Lawyers go to school for years to be able to understand and make a living doing what they do. There are just as many branches of law as there are martial arts systems. There's tax law, business law, bankruptcy law, constitutional law, family law, estate law, and the list goes on. Just like with martial arts systems, most lawyers don't know squat about the other branches. The last thing you want is to be represented in a murder trial by a medical malpractice lawyer. The last thing you want is to be taught what to say to a police officer in a self-defense shooting by a martial arts instructor. Any self-respecting medical malpractice lawyer would refer you to a good criminal defense lawyer. Any good self-protection/martial arts instructor would do the same. For all my students that are reading this book, If I haven't told you that before, I just did.